Welcome to the Razors Inc. podcast with your host, Jonathan Farini. There are countless movies and TV shows where two male leads, sometimes polar opposites, hit the road, seeking something. Sometimes it's a better life, like Of Mice and Men. Others, it's simply trying to get home, like Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. More than just a road film, however, there's one movie featuring two of Hollywood's biggest names, both early in their careers, where the two leads are seeking something else: redemption. So pour yourself a drink, pull up a chair, and hear Jonathan's take on movies, television, and today, another one of those overlooked movies that deserves a second look. Here's your host, Jonathan Farini.
I want to talk about a film released in 1973 by Warner Brothers, and it's called Scarecrow. And it stars Gene Hackman, Al Pacino, Eileen Brennan, and a wonderful character actor named Richard Lynch. I'm going to get back to all these folks in a minute, but I want to set the stage for you, no pun intended, as to why I'm talking about this podcast. So I grew up as a kid in the 60s watching every film that you can imagine at the theaters and then in reruns on television. By the time the 1970s roll around, I'm a teenager in high school. And, my father did not take me camping. My father did not sit with me and do my homework. My father would take me to movie matinees. And we would go and we'd sit, and he'd take me to all the movies. It didn't matter whether they were rated R or not. I don't know if I saw Midnight Cowboy in 69 or 70 when it was rated X. Probably not, but it didn't matter. It was just a matter about going and seeing the movies. And he was genuinely interested in the movies. I think he was a frustrated storyteller himself. But my point is this: I'm coming of age as a teenager, so I'm able to relate to a lot of themes. And as I've said in other podcasts, I was already engaged in making Super 8 films and writing, and I had that mindset. So these films of the 70s had a profound effect upon me, more than any other decade. I graduated high school in 1976, so when you look at all the films that came out in the 1970s, you can put two and two together and see how these movies would have a profound effect upon me. So this movie, Scarecrow, is a little movie that says a lot, and that's the motivation for this podcast. But it explores very complicated themes that are just as relevant today as they were then.
I'm a scarecrow. That's right. You're right.
Listen, have you taken a good look at your mug lately? Have you eyeballed it? I mean, if that's what being a scarecrow is, I don't want any part of that, I'll tell you.
Scarecrows are beautiful. Scarecrows are beautiful.
So I'm going to attempt to explore those themes with you, and I'm going to compare and contrast the film with another very well-known film. And I'm going to invite you to think about male bonding films. So it's 1973, and Warner Brothers decides to release this film, Scarecrow. And it's directed by a guy named Jerry Schatzberg. Jerry Schatzberg, interestingly enough, is known for the photograph of Bob Dylan on the album called Blonde on Blonde. It was written by a guy named Gary Michael White. That's with two R's, Gary. Now, Gene Hackman was 1 year off of The French Connection. He's a big star. So this is released in 1973. Remember, French Connection was 72. Godfather, 1972, was released. So Al Pacino is already a big star. By the way, Dog Day Afternoon wasn't released until 1975, in case you're thinking about that. What's the story about? Really, it's a very simple story, and it's so simple it's complicated. We're introduced to two characters, and they're on this country road, and they're drifters. So Hackman plays this character named Max, and he is this tough, do not get in my face, loner, just released from prison, who has his life savings tucked away in his shoe, and he's heading toward Pittsburgh, where he thinks he's going to open up a car wash. That's his dream.
Behold, the captains of industry, the prospective owners of Maxie's Car Wash, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Maybe Maxie's Car Wash.
Car wash.
Yeah.
Okay? For every car, there is dirt.
Max and Lion. The only difference between them and the Rockefellers is a few $100 million and about 1,500 miles.
And on the other side of the road, there is this emotionally fragile, you can tell it right off the bat, quirky, lonely, and very sympathetic character played by Al Pacino. His name is Lion, so it's Max and Lion. The irony is that Al Pacino's character is anything but a lion.
Hey, how come you didn't pound that old lady in the mouth?
Old lady? What old lady?
The one that hits you in the palms with a stick.
She was a nun.
So they decide to join forces and head together on foot, on rail, however. You know, they're like hobos of the old day, drifters. But they both have a purpose. Hackman wants to get to Pittsburgh to open up his car wash, he thinks. It's a fantasy, but that's what motivates him. And Lion, Pacino, wants to get to Detroit to try to reunite with his young child. He is estranged from his wife. And throughout the film, they have ups and downs. They end up in prison. What's happening is, before our eyes, this tough guy, this Max guy, played by Hackman, slowly is chipped away at by Lion and becomes a lot more sensitive because they like each other as friends. And it's very fascinating to watch, and it's very difficult writing, by the way. They end up in some county work farm jail, and there's an attempted rape of Lion. And the rapist is a wonderful character actor, a guy named Richard Lynch. You should check him out.
How about it? How about what?
Yeah, how about it, yeah. I'll be giving O'Reilly a little relief, huh?
Richard Lynch was actually burned very badly in a fire, and it scarred him up facially. And that led to acting school. I think it was the Actors Studio, and he built a very successful career playing bad guys. And he plays this prisoner in this work camp who attempts to rape Lion. Hackman, Max, comes to Lion's defense. But it has the attempted rape has a profound effect on Lion and takes that sensitive, childlike joy away from him. And when they head out of prison and they head towards Detroit first for Lion to attempt to reunite with his child, we discover that Lion is now a little tough. He lost that charm. He's lost. And then very interestingly, Max now becomes more of a caretaker and attempts to light that fire, that ember of joy in Lion. And there's a scene in a bar where Hackman, in this attempt to bring back this beautiful childlike nature of Lion, does this striptease. And it's just a wonderful scene, and Hackman plays it to the hilt. Okay, so why are these guys on the road? Well, I told you Hackman got released from prison. Well, Lion, I guess, just got out of the Merchant Marine. So in literature, sailors are easy to use by writers. It's very interesting. It's like the go-to occupation when you need an interesting character. So I call your attention to Five Easy Pieces. If you recall, the caretaker of Jack Nicholson's father was referred to by Jack Nicholson's sister in the movie was a sailor. But I just call your attention to the use of sailors as an occupation by writers and stories. It's low-hanging fruit, I think. But nonetheless, I digress. So they do end up in Detroit. And there's a wonderful scene with Eileen Brennan and other actors where they actually, get together with some lady friends in a house. Unfortunately, Lion's attempt to meet with the son via a payphone, his ex-wife is very angry and very sadistic and says the kid died.
Never even got born, Francis, because I was left alone. I slipped on the front steps in the snow. I fell down them. There was no one there to help me. It would have been a boy, Francis. Never even got born.
And Lion, when we're introduced to him and throughout the movie, is an emotional, fragile guy. And this just puts him over the edge. Now, as I said, Max, we're introduced to this very hard-boiled guy who starts to mellow out. And the roles reverse. That's actually what is occurring. So this hard-boiled Max now becomes the sensitive Lion, and Lion, through this information, is entered into this emotional depression. And there's this very sad, profound scene in a waterfall where Lion jumps into the water and plays with the children. Of course, the mothers freak out. Max goes in to rescue Lion, and the long and short of it is that Lion ends up in the hospital in a catatonic state. And we now see Max with Lion determined to stay with his friend. You know, the arc is complete now. It's a wonderful evolution of two characters that started out, one very empathetic, one very standoffish, hard case, and the roles have now reversed. And it's about male bonding without any sexual undertones or overtones. It's just that friendship between men. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story. So you might be thinking about Midnight Cowboy. Midnight Cowboy is a very similar theme. If you don't go looking for the sexual innuendo in Midnight Cowboy, you won't find it. In fact, as many times as I've watched Midnight Cowboy, I have to look very, very hard. And even after I look very, very hard, I'm unconvinced of any sexual undertones or overtones between those two characters. But my point is that Jon Voight is standoffish when he meets Enrico Razzo Rizzo, played by Dustin Hoffman, right? But by the end of the film, the roles are reversed when they're on the bus to Florida, right? It's a very sweet story. It's an arc. It's an evolution between two very different characters who start out at one point and reverse roles. Now I ask you, I gave you the theme of Scarecrow. I implore you to go watch it, download it, buy it, write that premium retro movie channel and tell them to play this movie. And I challenge you to put down the premise of Scarecrow on a piece of paper, as if you were submitting that as a story idea to a studio today, 2024, and ask yourself if that film could be made. I know the answer, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Back in the 1970s, and I've said this in other podcasts, and it's very interesting because remember, I'm telling you that I'm a teenager, and this is a very pivotal decade, the 70s, for me in terms of my interest in film. I went to film school. The 1970s had been taken over by young writing, directing talent. The studios had realized that was the market. And that was the genesis for the Coppolas, for the Scorseses, the De Palmas. And I'm leaving out so many people because the podcast isn't about the 1970s in the studios. It's about Scarecrow. So because of that, I believe this film, and because of the box office of Gene Hackman, and because of the box office of Al Pacino, this film got made. There is some talk that Warner Brothers was disillusioned with big budget films and they were more apt to give a shot to a small film. Maybe. I really think it was the box office of Gene Hackman and Al Pacino both coming together on this. And Jerry Schatzberg had directed Al Pacino in a seminal breakout film for Al Pacino, which was also a play called Panic in Needle Park. So it caught the studio's attention. It was the 1970s. These small stories could be told. You had two box office gigantuans, so the film got made. It's kind of lurked around in the shadows all these many decades. It hasn't gotten as much play over the decades as it should have. I hope it's rediscovered. I hope it's an impetus for writers and directors to do more of this. And ladies, it does not have to be about men. It can be about ladies as well. And I know that you can think of examples, Thelma and Louise, and there's lots of other examples but new and different stories about females who may start out with one persona and exchange personas with the partner, the friend, whatever it may be. This is ripe subject matter, folks. And if I was writing for the stage, if I was writing for venues where you can actually get the story out there and seen, and I would say small theater, off-Broadway, those types of venues, this is a theme I would be exploring. So with that being said, please watch this movie, Scarecrow. Ask yourself, what other examples other than Midnight Cowboy can I think of? Look at these wonderful actors in the prime of their career. Ask yourself, could this story be told today? If so, how? And enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself in the fact that this movie got made. I contend it would never be made by Hollywood today. No, that's my personal supposition. But take joy, revel in the fact that somebody green-lighted this film. And maybe, just maybe, somebody at a studio somewhere will green-light a similar film, will green-light a play, will green-light a streaming television program, and it might even be your story. Wherever you go, leave behind a soft footprint. Class is dismissed.
And like Of Mice and Men, several scenes in Scarecrow are absolutely devastating. But if you're looking for a film about transformation, brotherhood, and ultimately redemption, but without the standard Hollywood treatment, you're advised to check out Scarecrow. You've been listening to the Razors Inc. podcast with Jonathan Farini. Be sure to check out Jonathan's collection of fiction at the Jonathan B. Farini Story Collection at jonathanfarini.com. There you'll find everything from drama to romance, something for every reader. That's jonathanfarini.com, Farini with 2 R's, 1 N. Or drop an email to razorsincpodcast@gmail.com.